I'm Jenny, I'm the owner of Sipping Streams Tea Company, and today we are doing part 2 of a 3-part series called The Many Flavors of Tea. And so today I'm focusing on dark flavors. These aren't actually all teas that I'll be showing you today, but some of them will be, still have a dark flavor to them. So the first one that we're going to go over is an unorthodox black tea. This is our Assam CTC. It won first place at the North American Tea Championships. And you can see it doesn't actually look like full leaves. They look like little crinkled grape nuts. And that is the crushed, teared, curled process that the British invented to accelerate the manufacturing process of black tea, because they were importing so much tea so quickly, hence their national beverage is tea, that they couldn't keep up with demand, and so people were filling it with different herbs and sticks, and they just needed a way to process it very quickly. So it is actually machine mulched, and so it looks like these tiny little grape nut pieces. Almost look like a powder, but it's actually not a powder. They look like essentially tiny grape nuts. And that is from the Kongia estate, and it's this rich, malty, dark black flavor that you typically add with milk and sugar. And again, it looks like a black tea. Very almost golden hue, but very dark. It has a nice sweet finish to it. And when you drink it, it kind of feels thick and malty on your tongue. So that's a traditional black tea, an Assam tea. All Assams are from Assam, India. Typically, India names their teas after the different states or territories in India. So Assams are all from Assam, India, or Assam. Darjeeling would be all from Darjeeling, India. Ceylon would all be from Sri Lanka. Nilgiri is a place in India, so those different types of tea names are actually the location of where those teas are from, and actually they have a national trademark for each of those places. This next tea is a dark flavored tea, and is probably our most famous tea in this area of Alaska. It is the Yukon Quest 1,000-mile tea. And it is not just a black tea. It has a dark malty flavor to it, and it's a tea blend that I created for mushers in mind. This was supposed to just be a tea that was for one mushing season, just trying it out, sponsoring it just so mushers could have coffee alternatives, because some people don't drink coffee. And it has become so popular that we have made this tea for about 6 years now, and year-round. It is definitely one of our most popular teas out of everything. Not just because of the story of how it was created, but because of what it does. So I created this tea blend for the Yukon Quest. I went to them and I said, hey, I make teas. Would you like a blend that I specially formulate for you and your mushers? And said, oh yeah, we've heard all about you. We've heard about all of your awards you've won, and we would love a tea. And so I asked them, okay, what kind of tea do you want? And if you can see here, it's actually like a full leaf tea, and lots of different colors and particle sizes, because it's technically 4 different teas in one. So it's a tea blend. And so I asked them, what kind of tea do you want? And they said, well, something really strong with a lot of caffeine, because this race can sometimes be like 10 days. These mushers mushing from Fairbanks, Alaska to Whitehorse, Canada. Every other year it alternates where it starts and where it ends. And, people stay up for like 24, 30 hours waiting for mushers to come into checkpoints. It's definitely around the clock race on dog sleds. So anyways, they said, we want a really strong tea with a lot of caffeine, and our mushers are used to coffee. So can you make it taste really strong like coffee? It's got to have a lot of caffeine in it. And I was thinking to myself, okay, it better taste strong, not because of the caffeine, but so they think there's a lot of caffeine in it. And so I formulated it with our strongest, maltiest black teas that didn't get bitter and that you couldn't mess up on making because it's a race, and I'm sure most of those mushers aren't tea drinkers, so something they could just throw in their 14-cup thermos, go, and later on, hours later maybe, open it up and take a sip out of it, that it won't be super bitter that they'd be turned off by it. So I put 3 really high-end expensive teas to make it sweet, so it wouldn't get bitter if it got oversteeped. And technically, it's our white teas in there that have more caffeine than our black teas. And I chose it depending on the picking season of when those white teas were picked. And also the taste profile for the black teas, ones that didn't get bitter but were slightly sweet. So, anyways, now people have switched off of Red Bull. They don't even drink Red Bull anymore. They usually get a case of Red Bull, and they've come to our store, drank this tea, and they're like, I don't need to add anything to it. I don't need to add any milk or sugar to it. It tastes great. Like, oh, great. What does it taste like to you? It tastes good. It tastes like tea. So that's typically the answer we get, is that it tastes really good, it's highly caffeinated, doesn't give you the jitters, upset stomach, it's low in acid, and it definitely keeps you going. We've had thank you letters written by dog handlers of the race and mushers saying, oh my goodness, thank you so much for sponsoring this tea. I really appreciate it. It keeps me going. And one lady, she worked a 30-hour shift, and she decided to check her watch to see, hey, I wonder how much longer I have to keep staring and waiting for the mushers to come in. It's called the 1,000-mile stare with her headlamps on. And she like stare into the darkness, like hoping, waiting, and waiting for the mushers to come in. So some of them call it the 1,000-mile stare. But she realized, oh, I only have a couple hours left for my shift. I wonder what I've had today. And she only had 1 cup of this tea. Hence why we put a saying on the 1,000-mile tea. 1 cup is enough. So, and this last musher who won this past year, he said the first time he drank this tea, it was his first race with the Yukon Quest, and they said, oh, no, you only need 1 tea bag. And because we made these giant tea bags to make enough tea for a 14-cup thermos that is required in their gear. And he was like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm going to stick 6 bags in it because it really doesn't have that much caffeine. Like, I need more caffeine. And he said he was so wired, like, not wired, but just like totally amped and ready to go, and just stayed awake and stayed awake and stayed awake. And the nice thing about tea is that, unlike the coffee plant itself, there's different components in the tea plant that keep the caffeine in the bloodstream longer. It's not the chemistry of the caffeine itself. It is the components in the tea leaf. And also why you're calm and don't have shakes or jitters typically is because the L-theanine, which is an amino acid that occurs in the tea plant naturally, that just calms and relaxes your body. So that's why people feel like they're more in control. Maybe they feel more alert and awake, more focused. And so this past year we gave all the dog handlers for the race their own stash of tea also. Typically if you're a volunteer, staff, a vet at the checkpoints, they all have tea. But the dog handlers have to go from checkpoint to checkpoint, checking on their dogs and their mushers, and so they stay up all night driving. And so this year I decided, with suggestion from a musher's wife, to give each of the handlers' teams their own stash of tea so they could take it with them. But yeah, this tea is just amazing. This is definitely one of my favorite dark teas, but it's nice and sweet, and you can definitely re-steep it up to 4 times. It has this nice honey-like aroma and flavor to it, and you can see with the tea leaves here, they're very nice and fluffy when they infuse. So I don't know if you can see that very well, but the tea leaves are actually pretty big compared to when the tea leaves are dry. They totally expand. And you can re-steep this tea up to 4 times. Most of our teas you can re-steep up to 4 times, but you don't need to, drink that much caffeine if you don't want to, and it typically has way more caffeine than a cup of coffee does. And if you leave your tea in there for a really long time, it'll have a lot of caffeine. So that's another dark tea that we have that isn't just black tea, it's actually with white tea. This next one is a very, very famous at least in America and India, famous tea. This is the Masala Chai. And masala means mixed spices in Hindi, and chai means tea. So typically when people are at the store or the coffee stand and they order a cup of chai tea, they're saying, could I order a cup of tea? Tea. Because the word tea or chai means tea in Russian and Turkey and in India. So it's masala, which means mixed spices, which they have masala chicken and different things like that. They use very similar spices in their cooking that they use for their tea. So this will have, oh, it's so amazing. It has cardamom, it has ginger, it has cinnamon, pink pepper, black tea. It's great with milk and sugar, and if you cook it straight in milk, and I know some of you can't have milk out there, but if you cook it straight in milk, that tastes so much better than steeping it like a tea. Just actually simmer it on the stove in milk and add some honey to it. It's just so perfect. And that's how a lot of people, street vendors, make it in India. They'll sometimes like pull big pots, like just dump the tea and kind of cool it back and forth as like an entertainment type of way to enjoy your tea. And then when the tea leaves expand again, you'll see that's huge and nice and fluffy, but not opened all the way, and so you can definitely re-steep your tea multiple times. And you'll see here's the whole green cardamom pods. Those are organic. It's made with organic black tea. And if you make it that traditional Indian way in milk, you can chill it and make masala ice cream with it. And it just is really good even without sweetener. It has vanilla in it too, so it just, if you are diabetic or trying to have low sugar, it's really, really good just on its own. And then this last one is a very interesting one because this is not tea at all. There is absolutely no Camellia sinensis tea leaves in it. No tea plant tea leaves in it. But what's interesting is that it is a very unique infusion for people who are caffeine sensitive but want something dark and something they can have as a treat that's low in sugar because there's no sugar in it either. And this is our chocolate passion. So we're like, wow, a chocolate tea. Well, no, it's not tea. There's no tea leaves in it at all. So that's what's great. It has no caffeine in it. All infusions that don't have the tea plant in them are called the tisane. So this is purely a tisane. This has no tea leaves mixed with cacao nibs. It is just purely raw, organic, roasted cacao nibs. Oh my goodness. This is what they turn into chocolate, okay? And the reason why there's no caffeine in it is because it's not turned into chocolate yet, and you're not consuming the whole cacao nibs. You're drinking an infusion of it. It has different spices like cinnamon, pink peppers, ginger. So it's kind of like a spicy, kind of like a Mayan chocolate. And technically, this is how the Mayans had their drinking chocolates originally because they didn't have processed sugar like we do nowadays. They didn't have milk that they milked from cows. They just took their raw cacao beans, roasted them, maybe sun roasted them, infused them in hot water, and there you go. Mayan chocolate, the original Mayan chocolate. And when it infuses, it has this nice creamy color to it. It's kind of cloudy, but that has to do with the cacao. And there's no caffeine in it either because it's not enough caffeine to count as caffeine. You're not consuming it. You can choose to eat the cacao nibs, maybe put it in vanilla yogurt, maybe in some cereal. It's very healthy for you because it's technically 100% cacao. The solids, everything is in it because it hasn't been processed into sugar, or into chocolate yet. And when it infuses, it does not expand because it is just the raw ingredients. So you'll see that there's coconut bits in there, and the cardamom pods and the cinnamon. I mean, it tastes pretty good. You can eat it. Those are many different dark flavors of tea, even though one of them technically isn't a tea. It's a tisane, which means herbal infusion in French. And yeah, if you have any other questions, we would love to hear your questions that you have for us, an interesting tea topic, anything that you want me to share about our tea company or tea knowledge and history. My passion is definitely tea.